This past fall, we checked another bucket list destination off our list and took a fall foliage cruise. And this is our good, bad, and ugly. Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Jordan.
And I'm Jared.
And this is JJ Cruise. Thank you so much for joining the video today. Today we're talking all things fall foliage cruising. Now these are cruises that typically take place in the northern part of North America. And it's a unique cruise itinerary that has a lot of different destinations.
We're going to answer all the questions that we get all the time as travel agents. For example, when's the best time to go on a fall foliage cruise? Is this cruise just for old people? Are there things to do when getting off at a fall foliage cruise? As well as, does the Wi-Fi work? And other questions like, what do I do on a fall foliage cruise? All will be answered by the end of this video, and we're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Before we get into it, we do want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. We are on the road to 75,000 subscribers. You at home could be a part of the first 75K JJ crew. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. This past September, we took an 11-night cruise aboard the Celebrity Summit. It was a round-trip cruise out of Boston, visiting some of the most popular destinations in the Northeast. We went to Bar Harbor, Maine, Portland, Sydney, Nova Scotia, sailed all the way up to Quebec City for actually what ended up being a couple overnights, and then came back down the coast.
This cruise is quite popular in the fall time for North America, which is that of like September, October time frame for the entire world.
When looking at the demographics of who typically takes a fall foliage cruise, the average age for a fall foliage cruiser falls between 65 and 70 years old. There are very rarely any children on board, and in general, this cruise is mostly gone on by North Americans.
Now, there will be some Europeans as well as South Americans from what we've experienced on board our cruise. But typically the thing to note is this is when most kids in the region are just getting back into school. So there typically is an older demographic on the cruise, and we saw that on the Celebrity Summit as well.
Let's kick this off and talk about the good. Now, probably on the top of the list, and something that won't be too surprising, is the views and scenery that you're going to get on this cruise. Cruising in and out of some of these ports, especially during fall time, is going to be some of the most beautiful and serene, picturesque ports that you will go to in North America.
For our cruise, we went up the St. Lawrence River, and when we were on that river, you had fall foliage all around you. So if your trees are changing colors, it is one of the most breathtaking and beautiful sights you can possibly see in the Northeast.
You also have nature all around you at many of these ports. So this is a cruise for nature lovers. For example, when you go to Bar Harbor, if you select an itinerary that has that on there, you have Acadia National Park within driving distance of the port. Many of these other ports are filled with wooded areas and beautiful walking paths that you are completely surrounded by the glorious nature of the Northeast.
One thing we didn't know going into our fall foliage cruise was really how these cruise ports were going to be. How diverse, or were they going to really feel all the same? We were pleasantly surprised. The diversity in cruise ports was well noticed. You have everything from like Sydney, Nova Scotia, to that of Quebec City or Halifax, that are major metropolises that you can go and do a lot of different things and explore different museums and different places that you would find in cities today.
One thing that was common amongst all the port stops were the people were all so friendly. Now, we have found every time we go into Canada, people are really welcoming and very warm and nice. But it was a pleasant surprise to go to Bar Harbor and Portland, Maine, and find that the people really did want you there, as well as places in Quebec, where sometimes you hear that everybody speaks French, but everybody welcomed us with open arms, and a lot of people there actually did speak English.
Yes, everyone was very friendly and spoke English, which, of course, when you're going to someone else's country or region, and if they don't really speak English, we respect that. But when they are able to speak English back to you and love to do it, it just makes you feel even more welcomed and at home, and definitely gets you comfortable when traveling.
If you are someone that currently is living in the United States taking this cruise, something to know that was a very big positive for us is that the exchange rate going into Canada heavily works in your favor. For us in September when we went, everything was about 25 to 33% lower given kind of what day we were where. But that really does help when you're trying to save your nickels and dimes and going into another country where prices can sometimes be a little higher. So just something to know and something that definitely went on our good list for this cruise.
One thing we noticed right away is the actual ease of getting around at ports. This is something that's really good to note because there are a lot of people that may have different accessibility needs that aren't able to go on every cruise out there. Well, this cruise we have found to be very easy to get right off the ship and right into the action or the heart of the cruise ports. We were able to get right into nature or right into the cities, wherever we may be. And there is a lot more availability for those of all types of mobility. We really appreciate this. We love all-inclusive traveling or inclusive travel. And this is something that we find the Fall Foliage Cruise to be very good at.
On that note, one thing that I do want to add is that if your itinerary takes you to Halifax, the hop on, hop off bus actually comes right to the cruise port and is a great tour that we highly recommend. We know some people have done it on the channel and some of you actually recommended it to us. So if you find yourself in Halifax, definitely check out the Ho-Ho because it's an easy excursion to get on and it's going to give you so much information about the area.
Maybe my number one good of going on the Fall Foliage Cruise outside of the views are what's going inside my body. I love the fresh food that is found on this itinerary. From fresh lobster to fresh maple products and goods, the food is delightful across the board.
We ate, I think, our way through every single port. If you are a lobster eater, you are definitely not going to want to miss the fresh lobster that you can get at pretty much any place that you go on a Fall Foliage Cruise. I will say I think we ate probably some of the best food, maybe outside of Alaska, that we have ever had on land while traveling on a cruise. This truly is a cruise for foodies and for seafoodies if you're someone that does like to partake in lobster and fish.
Another great thing about this itinerary is you are in some pretty calmer seas. You're either in a river or really along the coast. And what that does is give you availability of having less motion in the ocean. You're not going across the ocean. You're not going through some of the worst parts of a sea. And so you really get some really tranquil waters typically. And we found that even within our itinerary, which was during a hurricane, we actually were able to find that our ship barely moved, barely rocked, and that is something that is definitely sought after by a lot of people newer to cruising.
The last thing that we had to mention on our good list was the Wi-Fi. Not only did the Starlink Wi-Fi on this ship work really well, our cell phone plans worked in Canada. So we never had an issue kind of stepping off the ship, turning our data on, and being able to connect right away on land. This is very different, especially if you're cruising like in the Caribbean or over in Europe, where your phone may not work everywhere you go. So it was kind of an easy place if you are working from the ship or doing this as like a work from home situation, because the Wi-Fi was really reliable both at sea and on land.
Now, of course, we know our audience is across the globe. So if you're coming from Europe, Asia, somewhere else outside of North America, we know that your cell phone signals may not have all-included data, but what you can rely on is that the satellite feeds are strong. So with your Wi-Fi on board your ship, if it's satellite fed, you can rely on having strong Wi-Fi on board your ship.
Now let's move into the bad, and as always, we say these are things that are very good to know if you are taking a Fall Foliage Cruise. The first thing kind of goes without saying, but this is a leisure cruise, not an adventure cruise, and we definitely want to make sure that that is known. On board, it was very quiet, very serene, extremely relaxing, and on land, we kind of felt the same type of vibe. This is a very nice cruise for people that want to relax, take in the views, and just chill.
Enjoying nature is one of the number one things to do on this cruise and on this itinerary. So if that's something that doesn't interest you, this may not be the cruise for you. The next thing that we didn't think of and now know really well is the time changers are weird. For example, there are some ports in Canada or in the Northeast where the time changes by just a half an hour. And when that happens, it really is a lot harder than one time change goes by an hour, because you're not only thinking of what time it is by the hour, but also by the 30-minute mark. Something that is not normal for most cruise itineraries.
This is something that your cruise ship should inform you of, and typically the cruise ship does not change time. So for example, in St. John's, they are 30 minutes different from ship time, and you have to know that if you're going off the ship and looking at any local clocks, or if your cell phone changes the time automatically. It's very important to know that you need to stay on ship time if, of course, your ship instructs you to do so.
Another thing to know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but need to know, is you need to carry cash, and that can be both in US dollars as well as Canadian dollars. The reason for this, especially in Quebec City, is a lot of times places don't take card. So you do want to make sure you have a little bit of cash on you in case you have to get a taxi or you have to go to a shop or a stand and you find something you really love. And unfortunately, they only take Canadian or USD. You don't want to be without that loved item just because you didn't have cash at hand.
We went into Quebec City with no cash and quickly found that we needed some. So thankfully, we did find an international ATM where we were able to pull out some money. But I think going forward, if we ever do this cruise itinerary again, we will bring Canadian dollars with us before we ever step on the ship to just kind of eliminate that anxiety or that worry that we don't have the appropriate dollars that we need for transactions in Quebec.
One for sure bad was crowding. And this is something we even hate to say ourselves because we know this is a hot topic for a lot of ports on this itinerary to begin with. We understand why some of the people at these cruise ports, including Bar Harbor, may not be so much of a fan of cruise ships today, because when there are multiple cruise ships coming into these smaller cruise ports, well, they can get crowded.
Our day in Bar Harbor especially was extremely crowded. The sidewalks are very small there, and Bar Harbor is a popular destination for people going to North America or visiting the Northeast in general. So the combination of people there on land travel as well as the people from the cruise ship just created for a lot of congestion in the streets. As always, we always recommend finding some off times to maybe go get a meal or find a place to eat kind of maybe off the main streets to avoid being around so many people at once.
The other thing we always recommend is making sure you're not just browsing. We hate it when people go and just look and never buy a thing. And that is a main thing of why so many of these places don't want cruise travelers today. So when you go in a shop and find something you love and take it home as a souvenir. Same with a place to eat. Don't just get a coffee. Go ahead and get a full meal and really give the people of these cruise ports what they really want, which is good business with good people.
One last bad, and something that you really do need to know and plan for on this type of itinerary, is the weather. The weather can be inclement, especially in the fall in the Northeast. This means you could deal with high winds, you could deal with rainy days or cloudy days. So of course, things like layers are always important, as well as umbrellas, maybe rain boots, because there was a couple of different days throughout our 11-night cruise where we did encounter a little bit of moisture.
Now I know we said hurricane for our cruise. That is actually very rare for this itinerary, and that was why it was such a specific note and news across North America, because it is not normal for a hurricane to go in that region. But since these are during hurricane season, that is why it is a little stormier or a little bit potential chance for inclement weather.
That was the bad. Now let's get into the ugly. But before we do want to remind you that we're both travel agents. We would be more than happy to help plan your fall foliage cruise. That's kind of why we do these reviews, is because we want to help our clients and all of you at home out. So if you're interested in booking a cruise with us, please head over to jjcruise.com.
Now it's time for our ugly, and truly, this is, well, unfortunate.
It might be the most literal ugly that we have ever had in one of our reviews. And some of you at home are going to be like, well, JJ Cruise, duh. But You can't always plan on this, which is really hard. For our fall foliage cruise, we went early to mid-September, I think right around September 10th of last year. And during those 11 nights, we pretty much didn't see any fall foliage or changing of the leaves on our cruise.
Of course, this can be very disappointing and something that just makes you think, wow, I wish I was on the next cruise or the cruise after that. But the unfortunate thing is you really can't always know when the colors are going to change. Now, one thing to note is typically said go later in September to middle of October and you're going to have a better chance of seeing these colors change on these leaves. But if you do those dates, it's still not guaranteed.
At one of the ports, I told Jared, we're going to walk until we find a tree that has changed. And we did successfully find one tree with some colors on the leaves. But yeah, it was a huge bummer because this was our fall foliage cruise and we just unfortunately didn't see a lot of fall colors. That being said, we still really enjoyed this cruise way more than we expected to.
So who is this cruise for? Well, we already said some of the demographics on board, but what we have found is this cruise is for people of all ages. It's just for more of what you're looking to do on your cruise. If you're looking for a lot of nightlife, if you're looking for a party, this is not the cruise for you. However, if you are looking for nature and being more serene, maybe you're one that's going out to be inspired to write your next novel or read that book that you just have been putting off for so long, this is the cruise for you.
One other thing that I do just want to add is that so many of these places that the ships visit on fall foliage itineraries are underrated. They are amazing stops. Places like Halifax, St. John's, Bar Harbor, Quebec City were phenomenal destinations, and we loved going in and exploring all of these little towns. And truly, it is a very different type of cruise that was a surprise for us, and it was a really good surprise.
The last thing, if you love food, this is also a great cruise for you, especially that seafood like lobster or some of these great goods from Canada that you don't see as much in the States. You can really get some great food at every destination, and we did on every port.
So that was the good, bad, and ugly of fall foliage cruising. Let us know in the comments below, what do you think? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Do you like this cruise, or would you ever take this cruise?
Let us know in the comments below. We love to hear from you.
Once again, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Jared.
Until next time,
See ya.